looks fun. This is getting interesting.
So because he bored you to death with that ridiculous introduction, I decided I'm going to do some magic tricks for you. How about that? No, actually, I do want to take you on a little bit of a tangent. Instead of talking about agriculture for just a few minutes, I'd like to talk about aviation. And I promise in the end, we'll see how it ties back into agriculture. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of flight. I'm sure all of us know the story of Orville and Wilbur Wright and their remarkable struggle to achieve first flight at the beginning of the 20th century. We all know the decisive role aviation played in World War II. Some of you who are older may recall some of our aviation heroes, like Chuck Yeager, pictured here, who was apparently of the right stuff and was able to pilot this aircraft right through the sound barrier in 1947. In 1969, I was 9 years old. That's the year man first walked on the moon. It's an event that truly captivated the imagination of the world. And to those in my generation, I guess especially youth in that generation, we found these accomplishments simply amazing. And many of us went on to pursue careers in science and technology because of these activities. If you don't mind, I'm going to pull some. So, I feel like things have changed. Things are different now. The magic of aviation that I knew as a boy seems to have largely dissipated. The public and our youth seem, for the most part, to be quite uninterested. It's just all become so ordinary, hasn't it? And I'm here today to tell you about a new revolution in aviation that I hope is going to bring back some of that spark, some of that enthusiasm about aviation that will help inspire some of our youth. It's just brimming with all kinds of exciting opportunities to use aviation to change the way we do things, to change the world, I believe. And what I'm talking about is the coming of aerial robots. You might say, what the heck is that? You all know them already from the news media coverage of military activity as drones. They can be very large. They can be actually quite small. They're also called unmanned air vehicles, or UAVs for short. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of fear has developed when we start talking about using military drones in civil and commercial applications. Great concerns for privacy, for example. Notice for those of you who understand it, my reference to the dark side here. There's a lot of fear about the potential for misuse, and I think that fear is quite well founded. Almost all of us will probably agree that as individuals, we've suffered tremendously recently in government misuse of technology to usurp our individual rights. But I'd like to offer you a vision of the future that's a little more optimistic. One in which we we hold our government officials accountable. We carefully select those we elect to represent us. We elect carefully also those who are to administer and enforce our laws and defend justice in our court system. And in this world that I believe in, we don't have to worry so much about new technologies, UAVs in particular, being misused. Instead, we see a world where there's tremendous opportunities to use them for all sorts of good. So what will they be used for? Pretty much anything you can imagine. They'll be used for all kinds of things, from fighting forest fires to Farming. That's right. I told you I'd get back to farming, right? So some of us, at least the ones of us like me who enjoy the fantastic selection of food we have at the grocery store, but don't spend a lot of time on the farm, take for granted the food we eat, but don't really know much about the very high-tech industry that produces that food. But it is quite high-tech. Genetics, you've heard a lot about the things going on at the chemistry level. There are also a tremendous adoption of robotics in agriculture today. Tractors and harvesters guided by computers using satellite control. And spray equipment that uses real-time imaging of the plants to regulate the flow of spray as the tractor moves over the field. But before we talk about how these aerial robots might be useful in agriculture, I wanted to maybe answer a few questions you might have about UAVs in general. So what exactly is a UAV? Well, take any aircraft, large, small, take the pilot out of the cockpit, and you have a UAV, an unmanned air vehicle. It's that simple. It's not a new idea. This is an image of a Mach 3 drone for reconnaissance carried on top of a piloted aircraft to be released at altitude that was developed in the 1960s. The technology is not new. This project was actually motivated by the downing of Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot over the Soviet Union in 1960, who was shot down. So the technology is not new. And while we're familiar with it being used in military applications nowadays, most civil aircraft remain piloted. It's what we're comfortable with, right? But something's changing. And what's changing is the technology for flight automation is becoming commonplace. It's widely used now in many different products, automobiles, but most importantly in consumer electronics. So believe it or not, if I can find it, almost all the technology needed to automate flight of a fairly sophisticated aircraft is contained in your cell phone. The accelerometers that are used for viewing orientation, the GPS satellite receiver for navigation, radio communications, computing, it's all here, right? And it's being mass produced in miniature package at very affordable prices. And that does something for aviation. What it does is it makes this technology available in a form that can be exploited in low-cost aviation components. If you don't believe me, you've probably all experienced a child or a grandchild who's just dying to have one of these new flying toys you see everywhere now, right? Small helicopters that a small child can fly around a room. And what you probably don't know is that just a few years ago, these toys were impossible. In fact, there were a lot of very highly skilled pilots who would fly small RC helicopters, but they had to stabilize them themselves. The task is kind of similar to balancing the broom on my hand, right? So I can do it, but if I take my concentration off the broom, I lose it almost immediately, right? With a small computer and the right sensors, can make corrections hundreds, even thousands of times a second to stabilize the platform. What does that do for you? Well, it makes a device that's inherently unstable and difficult to control very easy to control, right? A good example you all probably have experienced or seen is the Segway two-wheeled personal transporter. These devices are quite common now. And it's an example of a computer-stabilized device, right? So to give you some idea of, see how much time I got left, of how fast the technology is changing, I brought a couple of examples here. This is a flight control computer for a small UAV that my company built almost 20 years ago. It's like the size of a shoebox. It weighs about 5 pounds. It's a great doorstop now, right? And It's got all the necessary components. It cost a small fortune when we were building them, and it had very limited computing power. This is the modern equivalent of that product. It's much more capable, has all the required components for fully automating a vehicle, and it's the size of your cell phone, and it's actually quite affordable. So the technology has come a long way. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because size really does matter. First, we had to build airplanes big enough for a person to get in them, right? As soon as you can make it unmanned, as soon as you have that technology, now the plane can be much smaller. It only needs to be as big as is required to carry the automation equipment and the payload. The payloads were still kind of big, and the automation equipment was too, right? But now, even that's getting really small, right? So the aircraft themselves can become extremely small. And what does that mean for us? That means the cost of producing them and maintaining them comes down dramatically. It makes UAVs accessible to all of us, and that's why you're just now hearing so much about them when the technology's been around for many, many decades. It's because the technology we have today enables them to be quite affordable. So if you can imagine all of these devices, small, large UAVs flying around in our airspace, you might be a little concerned about safety, and rightly so. We do have regulations that are designed to ensure the safety of the public, flying public, and it's necessary that we update those regulations to allow for the introduction of these types of vehicles. And that's a slow, painful process. It's ongoing, but it's slow. But I'm here to tell you today there's no fundamental technical reason why we can't introduce UAVs, properly equipped UAVs, into the public airspace safely with proper regulations. So how will we use these UAVs in agriculture? Well, the most immediate opportunity is in the field called remote sensing. We use them to take images, and this is nothing new, right? We've been doing this for many decades from satellites and high-flying aircraft. What's new is that now the individual farmer or crop consultant can potentially own his own UAV equipped with a small camera and take those images anytime he needs to, under the cloud cover, very efficiently and at very low cost. So I have a very short video I'd like to show you. I'm going to bring this vehicle out. If you go ahead and start the video. This is an example of a little bit larger UAV that we actually use quite regularly now. If any of you are hobby enthusiasts, it looks very, very much like a traditional hobby helicopter, but it's fully automated from takeoff to landing. And you see it's very easy for me to cart around. It can easily fit in the trunk of a car and back of a pickup truck, something like that. This video is a short clip showing some of the work we've been doing with a vehicle of this type with several university partners here in Georgia over the past growing season, in which we imaged fields of cotton and peanuts for the purpose of collecting imagery that could then be used to study how we could take that imagery and turn it into prescriptions for farmers about how to better manage their crops. This work was supported in large part by both the Centers of Innovation for Aerospace and Agribusiness that you heard Bo tell you about a little bit earlier. So the vehicle can fly for about 30 minutes on batteries. It's fully automated from takeoff to landing, so you pre-plan a mission. It goes out, it flies the mission, snaps the camera pictures, and then when it's done, it comes back. To actually make use of the images, you have to actually do some work. You end up with a whole lot of individual images. They have to be assembled together into a single unified image through a process called mosaicing. They have to be geo-referenced so that when you look at the image and you see a problem and you want to know, well, where do I go in the field to see that problem? You have to know where that spot in the image is. So we do a thing called geo-referencing. And then various indices can be calculated from the camera image to produce false color images that bring out issues. In this case, false colors are used to indicate green is good and red is bad. It's basically an indication of plant health and vigor. You could think of it that way. Now we don't actually have the technology. So we don't have the technology today to turn an image by computer analysis into an immediate prescription for a farmer. That's quite a ways off. But we do have the means to collect these types of images and present them to an expert who can then turn them into prescriptions for a farmer. So to close, I'd like to challenge you to do a couple of things. First, I'd like you to be aware of the plight of the UAV, the concerns we have as a public for our privacy, and I'd like to challenge each of you to actively participate in restoring integrity to our government at all levels, so that we need no longer fear the introduction of new technologies like this, but instead can embrace them and exploit them for the good of all. And second, I'd like to challenge you to think creatively, like our friends at Domino's Pizza in the UK, and think about, well, how could I use a UAV in what I do and become part of this aerial robotics revolution? Thank you very much.